Hey everyone, Jennifer Lee Chan here from NBC Sports Bay Area. Just wanted to say hello. It is Saturday. Spent a little bit of time watching some of the NC2A tournament. Fight on for my USC women's team who advanced. But just not there. Um, Starting to pivot and look towards the draft a little bit. I know free agency is kind of winding down and the 49ers have made, but I think most of the moves they're going to make, there may be some signings of some guys that, are maybe a little bit lesser known. I know you're saying everybody they say signed is lesser known, but I think there are a few guys that were some a little bit bigger signings. I think Demarcus Robinson is going to be the veteran guy that you see in the wide receiver room. I think he'll be more involved than he has been in the offense in the past with the Rams. And I think he's a guy that's going to be, pretty involved, especially with Brandon Ayuk not being ready for probably not for the beginning of the season. I think Luke Farrell will also be involved very quickly. I mean, 3 years in that contract, I think that means he's going to play quite a bit. And I think that does open up things for George Kittle. I think it makes there be less pressure on him to be out there every single snap. So, I mean, there are some good moves, I know, but really, we've got to, got to emphasize the fact that all of this is because they are going to pay Brock Purdy a big contract. 55 to 60 million is what I'm predicting. But again, we're going to pivot forward a little bit towards the draft. Now, I talked to Connor Rogers, who's my friend who's been covering college prospects for a long time. My first combine was in 2017, and I met Connor out there, and we just started chatting. And we both were working for blogs, I think, at the time. I was working for SB Nation, and I can't remember who he was working for. We met each other that same year at the Senior Bowl. Um, Back kind of when the Senior Bowl was kind of more loosey-goosey. You could kind of go on the field and ask players and talk to them and whatever. And now it's very regulated. You have to be on certain sides of the field. You can't interact with team personnel. I mean, I was at the 2017 Senior Bowl and saw Keena Turner and I knew him from being at practice. So I went up and sat next to Keena Turner. And at the time, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, who is the Vikings general manager, he was on the 49ers staff. And I just sat there at the Senior Bowl and sat with all the 49ers scouts. I mean, it used to be like super casual. Now, 25, they separate the media from the team personnel. You can't interact with the players except for I think 5 minutes after each practice session. So it's kind of sucks that, the regulations have changed. But yeah, I remember just sitting up in the stands with, I don't know, I think there were 7 or 8 49ers scouts, Keena Turner, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, a couple other guys. I don't think Adam Peters was there, but they're definitely, I think, some of the other guys that are still around were there. So, anyways, I talked to Connor Rogers when we were at the NFL Combine, and I asked him what defensive lineman would fit in with the 49ers scheme. Now, the 49ers run that wide nine defensive line stance. So, are there guys that they could take at 11? And are there guys that they could take in the second round? And he said, this is a really, really good defensive line class. He's like, this pass rush class is good and it's very deep. He's like, you can be rich at 11 and you can grab one of the guys later in round two. So one of his favorites is Mike Green from Marshall. He said, I think he's the second best pass rusher in the draft behind Abdul Carter. 17 sacks at Marshall. He fits the scheme. He can rush wide. He has good heavy hands against the run for a guy who's 250 pounds. He can bend, he has flexibility, and that would be someone that fits with what they do. So, I think unfortunately, Drake Jackson, it doesn't sound like he's going to be able to come back, at least not this year. The patellar tendon injury that he's had has kept him off the field, except for just a very few games. I mean, this draft, they have to hit on their defensive linemen, unlike Javon Kinlaw and unlike Drake Jackson. I mean, I know they had great hopes for both of those guys, but this draft is so important to get young guys. I mean, you look at the defensive line, Nick Bosa, Kevin Givens, Jordan Elliott, and Yetur Gross-Matos. They have to hit on this draft. So Mike Green from Marshall is one of the guys. Another guy who Connor Rogers pointed out is Jalen Walker from Georgia. He said he played mostly off the ball linebacker, but he thinks he's a pass rusher at the end of the day. He said maybe San Francisco will like the idea of getting a guy who brings speed and physicality, get him on the field. And he said, we'd like to play that game. What's his position? on the field is his position. He said that could mean a little bit of off the ball on early downs. That could mean it's third down, it's get off the ball and go. It's like rushing from a wide alignment. So I think those two guys are really interesting guys to look at, maybe at 11. Um, but I think the 49ers are going to go defensive line at the beginning, is what I'm thinking, just because of how they've completely, I want to say, decimated the defensive line. It's just those four guys and a couple of guys that no one really knows. Um, so. A couple other guys that Connor Rogers pointed out maybe later in the draft because they could actually, I think they're going to draft more than one defensive lineman. Donovan Ezaraku, he said from Boston College is good because he's got some good length and he's not the widest guy, but he can rush the pass rusher and he fits this scheme. When he make it there, he said maybe continue. The combine pushes him too far up, so maybe he'll be there, but not sure. He also said Josiah Stewart from Michigan. If you want to go any deeper, he's a small guy, but stands up and flies off the ball. He's got elite speed, and he says he thinks he was 99th percentile of pass rush win rate in the country. So while he didn't have as many snaps as all of those other Michigan guys who are like way high on the draft, this is a guy who maybe is kind of under the radar, but when he had his opportunities, he really took advantage of him. So he said, this is a really good class for San Francisco to replenish their areas of need, especially defensive line, defensive tackle. So the 49ers have to hit on this draft. Like I said in my last video, it is completely imperative that they really get players who can contribute immediately because they are not going to be able to keep Kevin Givens, Jordan Elliott, and Yetur Gross-Matos out there for all those snaps. They've got to have 9 guys on the rotation, bounce them in and out. I'm really surprised that they got rid of Leonard Floyd and Malik Collins. Those guys played a ton of snaps in 2024, but it's a new era. It is the Robert Saleh 2.0 era. And another thing Connor Rogers did say, so he covers the Jets and he also works for NBC in their draft coverage. He said, the thing about Robert Saleh is he really finds guys who can do a good job. And it may not seem like a fit at first, but the way he sees players, they adjust to the scheme and he can see their qualities and he gets them to play really well. And he made an example out of Will McDonald. So Will McDonald when he was at Iowa State, he led the Big Ten in total sacks, so tied with Von Miller. He got drafted to the Jets, and normally he's 4I. And so Connor Rogers said the word on the street was that this is going to be a bad move. He's not going to fit into the scheme, but Robert Saleh found a way to use him and double-digit sacks, and he's played really well. And so I think Robert Saleh coming into this defensive room is why all these moves have been being made. Now, John Lynch obviously said, hey, it is a budgetary constraint year. And that is what they told Kyle Juszczyk. That is what they're telling everybody. And I believe it. They have to pay Brock Purdy. But I think also it's Robert Saleh coming into the room and saying, okay, let's flush these guys who don't fit what I think is most important while also reshaping the budget. And let me find the guys in the draft. Let me get some other free agents that are going to be maybe lower on the totem pole, bringing them into the 49ers, and we'll retool and reshape this defensive line and how they rush the passer. So, um, he's just really good at that. And I think being with the Jets and trying to be a manager of all things, I think Brandon Staley said it best. He's like, being a head coach is global. You have to think of everything. And I think sometimes guys are better when they're at more specific positions. Like, I think Brandon Staley will probably go back to being a defensive coordinator and stay there. Robert Saleh probably will flourish as a defensive coordinator with the 49ers. So I think him being a part of the coaching staff is going to make a world of difference. And I know everybody's really excited about it, but it's also how he scouts players, what he sees from them, what he thinks they'll bring to the defense. And I think that'll be a reason that it's much more successful, maybe even with names that are less known. So that is my Saturday update. I'll probably do another one on Sunday because I'm actually going to be home all weekend. So excited to talk to you guys. Maybe I'll do a live. Let me know what you think. And yeah, we're gonna pivot to the draft. Connor Rogers told me about some other guys that we will talk about tomorrow. Some guys on the offense and maybe some linebackers. So talk to you about those coming up.